Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, how the heck are you? You will be hearing this June 2024, starting to be summer, and San Diego will be having June gloom, so how is it where you're at? This is another episode with Jen about attachment. I think it's really helpful as I'm coming out of this really blended place that I've been in for, it feels like, a really long time. Jen and I talk about some of the things that happened and are happening between us, and she has some insights. I think it's a really helpful episode. We talk about bids for connection, and for me, knowing when I'm blended, when I'm not blended, the expectations. I don't know. I just think it's great. We talk about the willingness to be in the process, and Jen talks about when she had some attachment injuries, how she would really follow her physical sensations, and how our culture is often affect phobic, meaning that we don't let it be okay to have big feelings and big reactions. I talk more about my OCD, my trauma, and just some of the things I've been working through, and some observations about when I can tell if I'm very blended and when I'm not, and when it's a thought and when there's a preoccupation now that I have some distance. I think it's really helpful. In episode 246, there were a couple things I talked about being on the water on Mother's Day and taking a video of a little sea lion and sending it to Jen, and I didn't really do the follow-up to why that was significant. So we talk about that in this episode. The other thing that I don't think that I shared in 246 when I was talking about having this really difficult conversation with my mom is that after the fact, she asked me the next day, is this an ongoing dialogue that I want to have? Do I want to continue to meet with her and tell her the things that are not feeling comfortable for me? And she's open to doing that. She would just want a little bit of time. I'm thinking I mentioned this. I have such a hard time remembering what I mention and what I don't. And that she just would want a day so she could think of some questions to ask me. In this moment, I don't think that's something that I want to do. It feels like I got the majority of what I needed to share. There's nothing that I can think of like, I forgot to say this. And it feels like the point of talking to her was not about remembering every little detail, although in this moment, I feel like everything I needed to say I did, but it was more about having a voice and the things that felt burdensome to me, giving them back to her because they're not my burdens and they've really impacted how I see myself in the world based on my experience with her and her limited capacity at the time. But I just thought that was such a kind and generous thing. And if you have parents, caregivers, people that you're not able to do this work with because they're not around or they're not capable, I do recognize that this comes from a place of privilege, and it's my experience. I'm going to share my experience, and it may be activating and triggering for you. And if that happens, I'm sorry. I think that's pretty much all I have. I do talk about some analogies with my preoccupation around food and my eating disorder. I don't know if that's triggering for anybody, but I just talk about how that preoccupation with my attachment system with Jen, I can see how it's very similar to what would happen to me when I was actively struggling with my eating disorder. I suspect it's part of the rumination, the trauma, the OCD, those pervasive thoughts that just do not go away. I think it's all the same thing. It just comes in different forms, but I just want to give you a heads up. I think that's it. And now, on to the show. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Hi, my dear friend. Oh, how am I? I'm tired today, if I'm being honest, but I'm happy we're here together and recording. I know we had to reschedule from earlier in the week.
Yeah.
Because I was tired. I don't know. I'm hitting like some sort of fatigue-y kind of stuff. I have to probably look at getting my self-care a little bit more on point. A lot of end of the school year stuff, and
yeah,
there's a lot that I'm juggling. Most of it mundane, some of it not, some of it pretty serious, serious stuff, but yeah, oof. I didn't expect all that to come out. It's all good, but
yeah,
some of it's parenting challenge. And again, all good. But wow, what some kids have like facing them at such a young age is really incredible. I'm just appreciating the challenge of making big decisions and how to sit with them, how to sit with pros and cons and mitigating cons and taking risks. And there's been a lot of that this week. So that may also be why I need a little extra sleep.
Yeah.
How about you, my dear? How are you doing?
Well, let me answer that in a minute. Your life has so many more moving pieces in it than mine does. We're at different stages in our lives and what's going on, and my kids are flown. I really thought once my kids were grown, the parenting would get easier. And in some ways it doesn't, which is a little surprising. But what you deal with on a day-to-day basis with all the moving parts in my life is just very different. And I think it's important for us to keep acknowledging that.
Yes, thank you. It's helpful, right? And I mean, I know you've been in your version of it, right? However many years ago when you were where I'm at in my kids' developmental trajectory. And obviously there's lots of differences. I don't have twins but this challenge, I'm not sure how freely I've spoken of it, on the podcast, but having neurospicy kids, having twice exceptional kids, I'm having non-binary, transgender kids. It's a lot to shepherd them through, and I'm trying to do it as thoughtfully and lovingly and groundedly as possible. But and not to kind of be able to keep my fears.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I don't want, I really, my kids are going to need to walk in the world very confidently. So trying to reflect that confidence. And I am very confident in them. It's the rest of the world that makes me feel a little shaky sometimes.
Sure.
But anyway, it's a lot. Maybe we will set aside an episode for that later, particularly if we have any listeners that are interested in those topics.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Yeah. Shoot me an email just because I have demographics on the listeners, you, the listener, from a while ago. And I always want to create content that feels relevant to who's listening. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is hard. I'm actually doing really well. This is day 4 of feeling like I'm back to my grounded self. And it is so nice to not be in this high state of dysregulation. And I've had some really interesting insights. Some of them I've shared with you. Some of them I talked about a little bit in the previous episode 246. And I recorded 246 a few days ago and listened back to it and realized that I started to share something and didn't follow up about why I gave that piece of information. And it actually dovetails into something that happened this morning with you and I. So I wanted to circle back to that also. Is there anything that you want to say before we get started though?
No, let's do it. Let's jump in. Wait a second. Right as I said that, there's my impulsivity. I want to just say, sure. I want to say yay. I want to say I'm so happy that you're feeling better. And I understand I've been there myself in the throes of that particular type of dysregulation where you're really blended and just in with a very young and wounded part. Oof, it's a lot. It's a lot when you're in it, and it's beautiful to come out of it. And the trick is remembering when you're in it that you're going to come out of it.
And knowing that I may slip back into it again, that it's not a one and done and now I'm done and like, oh, I can put that behind me, of really being willing to be in the process and just be in it when it's happening.
Yes.
This has been one of the hardest things I think I've ever experienced. So it's been really, really hard.
Yeah. Yes. I like to phrase that as like kind of taking our willingness temperature, so to speak. Like how willing are we to be in relationship with that part of ourselves, with that aspect of our experience, with that part of our history. And I think the more we can work on that willingness muscle, the better.
Yeah. Thank you. One of the things that I had shared in episode 246 is I was talking about on Mother's Day that I was having some attachment injuries. You were away and I texted you a little bid for connection that I was missing you. You said you had sent me something And then you sent me flowers and some fresh fruit. And then I felt connected. And then I started to feel disconnected. And I took myself for a solo kayak paddle, and I saw this adorable little sea lion, and I took some footage of it. And I sent you a little clip, and I sent it to a couple other people. And while I was on the water, other people had responded to the little video clip. And I thought this was a nice, again, often this is not conscious for me, but I thought this is a nice way of connecting, that this is something you can share with your partner. You could share with the people that you were with if you wanted to, because it was, most people don't get footage of a sea lion on the water. It's kind of novel. And I didn't hear back from you. And so that whole day, not because of this alone, but I was going in and out of my attachment injuries with the story of there's no room for me, and listen to 246 if you want more information. And then when we had talked on Monday, you had let me know that you didn't even get that text until Monday. So in the absence of having information and without a secure attachment, I made up a story in my head of like, you didn't even respond to this. Like, what is that about? Because my attachment injury was stronger. And then last night on Thursday, I knew you had an event going on, but you haven't been feeling well. So I texted you and said, hey, just checking in, wondering how you're doing. If you don't have time to respond, no pressure. And then this morning, you sent me a screenshot of that with a response that didn't go through. And you're like, I just saw this. I'm so sorry. And my response is, I totally forgot about it. And then we had a little bit of a text about like, how is it for you not knowing when something is going to hit my attachment injury and I have hurt feelings about it? And other times when I'm like, no big deal. And then I said, maybe we need an emoji. And then the third emoji would be like a sheep in wolf's clothing, because often when I reach out for these bids for connection, I know I'm struggling and I'm trying to be in my adult. And if you respond, then it often soothes me. And then like with you not getting the video, then it activates me. And so I feel like that wolf is just hiding, but I'm often not even aware of it. And so part of me has a little bit of embarrassment, because it's like, you never know which part of me you're going to get when I'm going through these. It's trauma.
Yes.
It's trauma. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. It's not like I'm choosing to be reactive. And I'm very clear now that I'm feeling regulated how much of this is complex PTSD and how it activates my nervous system and my OCD thinking. And it's just very painful. But anyways, so how is it for you knowing like, then I'm like, no problem.
I think I texted back, I got you, whichever one of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that that's important. It's funny, just kind of going back to what I said earlier about my kids, like confidence is such a beautiful attribute sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. That I have the confidence that you have this, right? Mm-hmm. And because I don't have to jump in and fix you, I know I can't do it for you. I know it's something that you are aware of. Self-compassion is so important here, because you're right. You're not doing it on purpose. This is like nervous system responses. You're not choosing this behavior. You can choose I think you've made a deeply committed choice to stay curious about what arises in you. Mm-hmm. And that's a choice, but an active one and one that takes effort. Yeah, you're not waking up in the morning and being like, I choose to, be reactive in this. It's not how it works.
I choose passive aggressiveness today.
I think it's beautiful and really poetic, especially when it lines up quite like that. So I was someplace new and I hadn't like logged onto the internet where I was at. So I got my reception was not great. And I saw that you had sent me something, but it was just a blank. It was just like a blank, screen box, so to speak. Right. I couldn't click on it or anything like that. I mean, I think one thing this also illustrates that's really useful sometimes, and I'm going to geek out for a second, right? So the cognitive scientists, the last time I checked the data, which is a while ago now, but I love this little geeky snippet, right? It's that at any given time, we have 4 billion bits of information available to us, but our awareness can only hold 2,000, which is just mind-blowing and staggering. So it's kind of like as we're looking for information in our environments, but also inside ourselves, right? It's like being in this incredible cavern with a very dim flashlight. that's filled with all kinds of things, your fund of knowledge, your history, your memories, and as well as the things that are outside of you and I don't know, song jingles and all kinds of commercial jingles and all kinds of stuff. But what happens is when something's come up for healing like that, and you have a strong narrative that you developed, sometimes I know my deepest attachment wounds are pre-verbal. So they're not even like complete sentences sort of a thing, but we're looking that little flashlight with its 2,000 bits of information availability is looking for confirmation, and it's going to capture and seize on, I haven't put this together, but be preoccupied with, right? Things that confirm the wound and the narrative, however it's showing up, which is why it's important for us to know our tropes, right? It's important for us to know our histories. But then it will not necessarily pay attention to things that disconfirm the narrative. So, you can, I've been there with this, my version of it, but we're speaking of your version of it on Mother's Day, is, okay, this bid didn't get an answer, but the Instacart flowers and fruit is not going to be as paid attention to. And I think there's something important about knowing that this is so human, that this is how humans work. This is part of the human game, so to speak, and not to beat ourselves up about it, just to notice it with curiosity and compassion and see how it works in us. And when we're in it, we're just going to be feeling it and just in it. Right. And then when we're out of it, we can look back on it. I know one thing I've been suggesting a lot lately is that I need to do this too. We all need to do this, to track it. Because what'll happen when you're so deeply in it is you'll forget that you were not in it for a solid couple of weeks or however long there. It'll just feel like, it's like your brain, like, I don't know. It's like it takes out when you've never been in it and just splices together everything that's congruent with where you're at right now and plays you the tape. And it will never feel like you've ever not been in the throes of your painful, wounded narrative. But it's just not true. And we need some sort of anchors, whether this is friends, partners, a therapist, a coach, to remind us, right? Or something as handy as just having jotted it down on our calendar. I used to do a little smiley face in the corner when I was kind of free of it and doing okay. And then little, tearful little faces, it was pre-emoji times, but they were little emojis really on the corner of my calendar days.
Right. And I did that last night since you and I had talked about it, because I'm losing track. So I'm on day 4 now. It's interesting. In episode 246, I talk about this, and I don't think that this is very helpful, at least at this point. I'm going to repeat myself a little bit. What I had shared is, when you're at home and I don't hear from you, I know what the reasons are. You're working, you're with your kids, you're tired, you're with your partner. And those things are known and familiar, and those tend to be more soothing to me. I still get dysregulated. I still get preoccupied if I'm in an activated state. What I notice happens is that because this is new with you having a partner and going away, and we haven't really figured out, do we stay in touch? Do we not stay in touch? What does the pattern of our communication look like? Because we have, over time, I think we have a very stable pattern of what our communication looks like on a day-to-day basis. And when you go away, that's changed for a number of reasons. And what happens for me is, without having the data of why I'm not hearing from you, that seems to activate even more that narrative of, I don't matter, I don't fit in, there's not a place for me. When you go away, I disappear, which is about my childhood. It's not about you. But I want to make that clear. But part of what I'm really working on now is visualizing myself being loud, taking up space, crying, yelling, physically being larger, knowing that I have a right to all of my feelings, all of my experiences. I have a right to be big and to take up space. Because the wound is about not being enough and about you, and it's not. It's about me being able to fully be me in every situation. And I may not fit into every situation, but that's not about me, and that's not a reflection of me. And you've made it very clear that there's room for all of me and all parts of me. I feel like there's a part of this that I'm not articulating well, and I don't know how else to articulate it.
It is hard to articulate, navigate these experiences. I understand that. I think you're doing great. We communicate verbally, right?
Mm-hmm.
But remembering that verbal communication is in many ways symbolic communication, and
Sure.
we're going to miss some stuff in the translation for sure. If we can't not.
Yeah. I had an interesting insight yesterday, and I was talking to my husband about this. I don't know that I've talked to you about this, Jen. If you have an eating disorder, I'm going to talk about what it was like when I was really struggling with my eating disorder and how it feels very similar to that preoccupation and that feeling like nothing's going to satiate it. And this is all based on my own experience. This is not my area of expertise. So I could be saying things that are incorrect, but this is what's true for me. So if we're talking about an anxious preoccupied attachment, which is what comes up for me when I'm getting activated, that I have an anxious preoccupied attachment with you. And while I was going through all this, I thought, oh my gosh, if I had this the whole time you and I have been friends, and now that I'm back at baseline, I'm like, no, I don't think that that's what was true. But in the moment, I'm like, oh my gosh, how could I not see it? So just to say that, when I was really, really struggling with my eating disorder, and this may tie into what my OCD is, my trauma is definitely related to my OCD and my eating disorder, I would get a food thought. So say it's Baskin Robbins. And I would be so pulled to that thought until I got it, thinking that that is what would relieve the obsession. And then I would get it, and it would maybe satisfy it for a little while, and then I'd be on to something else. And I can remember going through periods where I was really struggling with my eating disorder. I would let myself have whatever I wanted. So I'd get Baskin Robbins, and then I'd want something else, and I'd get that, and then I'd want something else. And nothing ever hit the spot. And because I'm feeling sensitive if you have a history of an eating disorder, because I'm not a purger, I could only eat so much because I ate a lot. And so it felt like it was about these things. And as I got recovery from my eating disorder, I would drive down the street and see a Baskin Robbins and go like, I don't really want that today. Ice cream in general does not settle well with me. I eat it, but the difference of if I don't have it, I'm going to be stuck on this, and this is what I need, and I have to have it. And I get that, and then that's not enough, and I want something else, versus I could have it, but I tend to get a headache. It just doesn't set well. If I want it, I can have it later. And the thought still may be somewhere in my field of vision, but it's not up front, and it's not in the car driving the car. And what I noticed yesterday was, and it was very similar to what happened on Mother's Day when I was in this place of struggling, that I was crocheting, and, I'd think about you, and then it's like, oh, you're probably doing something. I'd go back to crocheting. And sometimes when I'm crocheting and watching TV, I get a little restless, but I thought, this is really what I want to do. So like the thoughts were there, but how I dealt with them was just like, oh, I noticed them and then kind of moved on to the next thing. When I'm in a place where I'm struggling with my attachment injuries, I'm preoccupied about the thoughts that I have about you, where you are, where I am in the relationship. Do I fit? Do I not fit? And I judge, all I'm doing is staying home and crocheting and watching TV, and what a loser, and I don't have a life. And yesterday I thought, this is really how I want to spend my time. Steve and I went out, and I went to Aquafit in the morning. I saw some clients. So whether this is all I'm doing all day or not, it doesn't even matter. But even in my wanting to explain that is some of that justification of like, I'm not crocheting and watching TV all day, just most of it. But that shift. And so my question to you, the listener, is, does any of this resonate for you? And it may be something very different. I have this one obsession around my car doors being locked. I don't know what it is. I don't check any of the other doors in the house or make sure that things are turned off. But Steve and I were outside yesterday, and I'd been out to my car earlier in the morning, and I said to him, like, I'm wondering if I locked my car. And I had forgotten that he had put my registration in my car. He's like, I locked it. And I was able to let it go. But are there certain things that you really focus on and perseverate on, or that take up a lot of space? Or do you notice times when it's just a thought and it kind of floats by, or it's there in your periphery, or you feel like you have to act on it, or it's feeling very prevalent for you? Because I'm really seeing that the combination of my complex trauma and my OCD, and when I get activated with these attachment injuries, is when I am just in it, and there is no taking things lightly. There is no letting things go. And and it's hard. And I can see the difference of when I'm not in it, how those thoughts kind of come and go.
Yeah. In IFS terms, we would say blended, right? When you're so completely blended, there's no other perspective. Like you're just thinking all of that. We use parts, and parts can sometimes really hang around certain memories, right? They can hold a lot of our attachment wounding. And then when we're unblended, it's still there, but we can have perspective. We can talk to it from either other parts of us or from self. And this preoccupied stuff is, it can get so intense. And it's interesting. I think I'd mentioned I came through, and I was considering talking more about it, but not today. Period of time post my divorce when these attachment wounds really came up for me. And it was related to a relationship that I was in. And that was the catalyst, right? So right now I hold the very sacred role of being a catalyst for you, which is another helpful frame for me, right? To be like, okay, here, I got you, right? As opposed to, I think what happens when this occurs in relationship and we don't realize it's happening, and this was certainly true of me a few years ago, is, we think it really is about what it's about. And it's not, right? It's this earlier stuff, and it can get very confusing. This is, again, we're working in some like meta awareness with, a therapist, a coach, a friend can be so helpful. So being blended with that part, having perspective, it does get easier. Like I am not in that place where I was 2021. So like 3 years ago, right? And you definitely helped me through it. And it was, I think, but it wasn't that unique position of being both the person to help through and the catalyst at the same time. What I'm experiencing right now is some of this preoccupation that I have. And it's, I don't think it's to scale to some of the stuff that you're experiencing right now, but it's cool because I'll be like, oh, this is what Patricia's talking about. And it's not with you, it's with another person, and it's just helping me be more soft, more tender, more accepting, more understanding because of these perspectives. My role as a therapist and a coach and a support person too, at this point in a 25-year career, it's been a lot. It's been a lot of people, and its gift is that sort of meta perspective on how frequently this shows up as part of just being human. And it really just helps for me keep that little bit of distance. And really that's unblending, right? Because when we're blended, there's no distance. And the good news is that lots of things can help us unblend. Even just knowing, that's why I love that autobiography in 5 short chapters, because chapter 3 is like you're watching it all happen and nothing's actually changed yet, except you have this awareness that these patterns are playing out. And it's really a beautiful moment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because you and I have been talking offline privately about this attachment injury that you had. And I recall it very clearly. I don't know at the time that I identified it as an attachment injury, and in this great awareness that I have now, I don't know, did you identify it as an attachment injury at the time?
Yes.
You did?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did we talk about that, and was I just clueless?
Oh, I'm not sure I remember that. I mean, I know how instrumental you were. It's hard because I love what you texted me this morning about, like, we need different emojis for like the different parts that show up. Because they do get, it can get really, really confusing. Like, I'm a knitter, and it can be the most tangled mess of yarn you could ever imagine. And straightening it all out takes time and effort, and often can be nearly impossible to do it yourself. I find anyway, for me. I can't therapize myself. I think for years, I just wanted to be able to just kind of stay aloof and not involve anybody. And I think there was one particular week that I was really in it, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to cancel everything this week, and I'm going to sit in this, and I'm going to come through it. And, you were there for me. My friend Tracy was there for me. I think I was working with a coach at the time who I leaned in on, and I did a lot of writings, which I'm actually trying to find. I know I saved them. I found some of them recently. And there was a lot of stuff that felt so present day. And then a lot for me felt very, very, very young, very pre-verbal. And I follow the physical sensations for that. I follow the somatic, and then just what arises, what memories, what kind of stuff. So I'm trying to think if, I think we did. I'm sure we did, because you were so close to me when I was going through all of that. I know that we did speak of it in attachment terms. Now, I think we've been having conversations through this lens for the last 3 years. So I'm sure the conversations we have now are far more developed. And that would just make sense.
Yeah. I mean, I remember being very present for you. I think my pattern recognition was really helpful when I could reflect what I observed and what I saw. So it's not, when I say I wasn't as aware of the attachment injuries, I think I was very focused on the process and what you were experiencing, what I saw. But just having gone through this intense period of attachment injuries and then thinking back to that, I remember, so I've never said this to you before, I remember it being really hard for you to let go of. And me feeling perplexed by that.
So hard.
I mean, I never said anything to you, but you would be very, very preoccupied for long amounts of time. And I didn't really understand why, but it didn't feel like it was helpful for me to give you that information.
Yeah. No, you're spot on. Like, even after that present day relationship was over, it took a long time to, I don't know, I guess you'd say, get over it. There's so much work that's in that phrase that's not even about the relationship or about what was kind of presently going on versus what was kind of past activation of stuff. But so even knowing that, this is why, again, that poem, I love that poem so much, because I would watch myself just like loop right back into the narrative, even after, decisions were made and, I was no longer really, we could still reach out to each other and speak. It's not like it's a hard no contact, but, very, very little contact, and it would still come up for me, and doesn't anymore. I'm happy to say. But it was a process. I mean, even when I work with clients, I like to track things in terms of frequency, intensity, duration. And then also I call it transparency. It's like, and it's really that meta awareness. It's like, how much are you able to watch yourself kind of be going through this as opposed to just being in it? And that's kind of the mindfulness piece, right? Knowing what our thoughts and feelings are as they arise, instead of just being them having us, right? Yeah. And so, it does. It's work that while you're doing it, feels like you're never going to not be doing it. And then some very many deep breaths later, it's like, oh, I'm in a totally different spot. And some of the things that would historically have activated me are far more manageable right now.
Yeah. So if you're in it right now and it feels like it's hard and it's never going to change and you're never going to get out of it, would it be helpful to start? Jen and I just talked about like a smiley face. I had wanted to use colors, but I really like this magenta color, and I have a green and yellow highlighter, and I thought I could use, green, orange, and red to kind of indicate where I'm at. But I also know I have days where I'm in it and I'm out of it. And so my brain has to have a total system, so I don't have a lot of help. So I just ended up using my favorite color marker and did a smiley face and then kind of a flat line for the face when, it was like not good, not bad, or if it was mixed more than one smiley face. But would it be helpful for you to just start noticing these things so that you have something that you can look back on when you're in it, just for some data? And I think that if you are autistic, my brain loves data and information. And I think I'm wondering if because my feelings can run so high that data, it can be grounding for me. It's objective and it balances out that part of me that feels very strong emotions.
So helpful. I mean, I know I've just found it to be so helpful. If I can be in it and it feels like my brain is tricking me into thinking that I've never not been in it, but then I can glance up at my calendar and be like, wait a minute, I had 2 solid weeks where I was okay not that long ago. Right. It can really be helpful to remember when we're in the thick of it.
Yeah. And I don't have data on this, what it feels like for me. And if you have a different perspective, Jen, is just as you started dating this new person and it became the catalyst for all of this trauma, and then working on my own trauma with my own coach, and then doing this healing work with my mom, it feels like the majority of the last couple of weeks, I have been more in it than out of it. I've just been so strongly activated. And it seems like the weekends are the worst, that maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then I come out of it on Monday, maybe have a day or two where I'm a little bit more balanced. And then something happens on the weekend where I drop back into it. And it may be the lack of structure that one of the reasons why I love work is it's very organizing for me, and it pulls on the parts of me that are not blended that can show up for clients. So that's just my observation. It doesn't matter, but if you're going through trauma and working through something, you may be more in it than out of it, just because of the nature of the intensity of the work that you're doing. And people around you may not understand that. They may think that you're depressed. They may think that you're spiraling, that you're getting worse. Hopefully, if you're doing this work, you're working with someone who has an eye on you and can tell, or what those danger signs are when you're not doing well and you need to get additional support. I, for the most part, I think, felt pretty confident in knowing that this was just trauma, but somebody close to me felt like I was depressed, kind of put a lot of labels on what was going on with me. And it felt very hurtful, and I felt very misunderstood. And I just don't think that this person understands what it's like when you do trauma work. So I guess from the outside, it probably looked like something else, but I have such strong feelings about letting people own their sense of autonomy and their experience. And I can get curious and wonder, but I am never, ever, ever the expert on somebody else's life and their experience. That is such in my mind, a very dishonoring thing to do. And to ask, how can I be here? How can I support you? I'm having some observations. I'm having some concerns. Are you feeling concerned? At what point does it feel concerning to you? But to really allow people to have the autonomy and be the experts in their own lives. And that's not a skill that everybody has.
No, that's right. Yeah, I love how you articulated that. And I think also just this confidence, like it really is safe for us to feel the full range of human emotions fully. And I think that so many of us are, I heard a friend use the phrase affect phobic, right? We're just really afraid of our intense feelings. And I think we come by that, again, developmentally in childhood, adults, well-meaning adults, just telling us that it's not okay to feel so strongly. We better hurry up and do something about it. And if we're not careful in therapy or in, coaching relationships, we do, that kind of quiet confidence, like, okay, you're in it and it's safe. It's okay. Because I think a lot of us have that trope that, oh my gosh, I should be scared because all the adults jump to help, or, we're not, you were alone in it. And that's terrifying for a kid in their own right. So I think, there's so many ways to develop that trope. Yes, but you're absolutely right. Like, we are not the experts, and being with a helper that can really keep your experience centered and in there with you, right? Because the solutions they're inside the problems. We have to get nice and close to whatever it is that's going on, whatever the challenge is. A lot of them are developmental challenges. Relationships have developmental trajectories and challenges. And we either meet the challenge or we need to know, how to take care of ourselves. I've been really lucky because, since its inception, the folks at the Resiliency Center, which I've been associated with for many years now, since about maybe 2007, we're what we call trauma informed, and that we all make sense. Especially, we can't always know all the pieces that illuminate that jigsaw puzzle, but we can trust that it comes from a place of learning and experiences, some of which I know some of mine are really lost because we don't start forming memories until we're 5, right? Or not the kind of memories that we think about. We do have muscle memory. We do have body memories.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I have heard for a number of autistics, so that they have memories that start very, very early. I'm not saying everyone who's autistic. So if you are a listener and you have memories that start unusually young, and people have told you that, that can't be true, I would trust that you know that, just because we just don't know about all the research and the capabilities, and we don't have that neural pruning that happens with non-autistics with allistics.
It's fascinating. Yeah. Question everything, right? Stay
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah. We need to wrap up. Is there anything else, Jen?
Thank you. No, I don't think so. Thank you so much for these conversations and for being there for me. And I appreciate the opportunity and the privilege of being there for you.
Yeah, thanks for being here for me. This is, there are not very many people that would be able to do the depth of work that we do together. And I just value you and the hard times that from my perspective, that we've bumped up against in the last couple of weeks and just coming through them. So
Yes.
It really is a beautiful thing when conflict is not seen as something negative or bad. And we can welcome all parts.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. Have a great day.
Bye, my dear.
Bye. Hey again. So was that helpful? Does this stuff resonate for you? This is hard stuff. And I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. They may be. I just may not be looking. So if you know of great resources that talk about attachment injuries. I did take Diane Poole Heller. She works with Peter Levine, who wrote something about the tiger. It's about trauma. I did take her online course. I think it was a 6-month course, but I remember it being difficult at the time, but anyways. So did that resonate? How are you doing? If you're interested in working with Jen, you can reach out to her at jen@heartfulnessconsulting.com. If you want to reach out to me, you can reach me at unapologeticallysensitive.com. If you have topics that you want to hear about, if you want to hear about some of the things that Jen was talking about, I just want to make sure that the interest is wide enough. I try and provide relevant information. You can shoot me an email at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's how your brain is wired. You have a right to big feelings. You have a right to be activated. You have a right to be blended. You have a right to get angry. You have a right to get quiet. You have a right to feel joy. You have a right to feel grounded. You have a right to be dysregulated. I think my favorite phrase is, you're not for everyone and everyone's not for you. And how do you find your people and know when you are with your people? You have a right to comfort, to your spins, your special interests. You have a right to be stimmy, jumpy, fidgety, active, quiet, peaceful, moving, not moving, in nature, out of nature, loud, quiet. All parts of you are allowed and okay and loved and accepted. I think that's all I have. Have a blessed day.